Oh my brothers and sisters, it is sad news that I report to you another disturbing trend. Massively progressive professor is being devoured by the authoritarian religious cult of social justice. What is playing out is literally a mirror image of the racist mob rule of the ugly past. But this is the present, and it is indeed ugly. This is so bad it has motivated corporate-controlled media giant, the New York Times, into covering it. When the left turns on its own. Bret Weinstein is a biology professor at Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, who supported Bernie Sanders, admiringly retweets Glenn Greenwald, and was an outspoken supporter of the Occupy Wall Street movement. You could be forgiven for thinking that Mr. Weinstein, who identifies himself as deeply progressive, is just the kind of teacher that students at one of the most left-wing colleges in the country would admire. Instead, he has become a victim of an increasingly widespread campaign by leftist students against anyone who dares challenge ideological orthodoxy on campus. This professor's crime? He had the gall to challenge a day of racial segregation. The Day of Absence is an evergreen tradition that stretches back to the 1970s. In previous years, students and faculty of color organized a day on which they met off campus, a symbolic act based on the Douglas Turner wordplay in which all the black residents of a southern town failed to show up one morning. This year, the script was flipped. White students, staff and faculty will be invited to leave campus for the day's activities. The decision was made after students of color voiced concern over feeling as if they are unwelcome on campus, following the 2016 election. Mr. Weinstein thought this was wrong. The biology professor said as much in a letter to Rashida Love, the school's director of First Peoples Multicultural Advising Services. There is a huge difference between a group or coalition deciding to voluntarily absent themselves from a shared space in order to highlight their vital and underappreciated roles, he wrote, and a group or coalition encouraging another group to go away. The first instance, he argued, is a forceful call to consciousness. The second is a show of force, and an act of oppression in and of itself. In other words, what purported to be a request for white students and professors to leave campus was something more than that. It was an act of moral bullying. To stay on campus as a white person would mean to be tarred as a racist. Which is exactly what happened. And there are videos popping up on YouTube trying to convince us that this is a good thing and that Mr. Weinstein is wrong. They conflate the ideas of voluntary exclusion and commanding expulsion as one and the same. They say it was just a few bad actors. Where have we heard that before, that made things turn violent and, as we'll see, turning the entire campus into one giant unsafe space? For expressing his view, Mr. Weinstein was confronted outside his classroom last week by a group of some 50 students insisting he was a racist. The video of that exchange, "You're supporting white supremacy," is one of the more milquetoast quotes, must be seen to be believed. It will make anyone who believes in the liberalizing promise of higher education quickly lose heart. When a calm Mr. Weinstein tries to explain that his only agenda is the truth, the students chortle.
Difference between debate and dialectic. Debate, wait a second. No, it is. Debate means you are trying to win. Dialectic means you are using disagreement to discover what is true. I am not interested in debate. I am interested only in dialectic, which does mean I listen to you and you listen to me.
We don't care what terms you want to speak on. This is not about you.
I'm talking.
This is all about him. On terms of white privilege. This is not a discussion. You have lost that one.
I am talking about terms that serve the truth. Those are the terms.
House of dialectic. You said some racist shit. Can you apologize?
I did not. Okay. You don't know. Emails and target students of color.
Nothing racist about it.
Do I think that black students in sciences are targeted here? Do I think they're targeted anywhere?
Speak to what you know and speak to the
Okay. I do not believe that students of color are targeted in the sciences here.
Why?
But maybe I misunderstand what you mean by targeted.
Targeted by racism.
Oh my God.
Get the fuck out.
So wait a second. To me, targeted means something different than what I just heard you define it as. I do not believe that anybody on our faculty with intent specially targets...
Exactly. Fuck what you gotta say!
Public protest. Was that not targeting people of color?
I'm sorry.
Due to an absence for people of color.
I didn't hear you at the beginning.
Your protest of day of absence, your presence taken as a protest, if you will. That's what you said in your email.
Yes.
But you're saying it's targeting
for black students.
May I answer that question?
Okay,
wait a second. First of all, day of absence has been here longer than I have. I have never protested it until the idea. Until no. First of all, I didn't say. Would you like to hear the answer or not?
No. Are you going to get
You're useless then. You're not learning anything. Chill. Listen.
Stop telling people of color they're fucking useless. You're useless. Get the fuck out.
Stop. Chill.
Fuck you.
Please.
Piece of shit.
Listen.
Somebody kick this.
Do you understand? History could pivot in this hallway right now. If oh my God! Listen to me. Yes, I know. And history could pivot in the direction of the values that you are standing here for.
Yeah, resign.
What?
Resign.
I'm not resigning.
Okay.
If I owe an apology, I will deliver it.
Wait, hey. Ho ho! Bret Weinstein's got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! Bret Weinstein's got to go.
You also need to apologize tonight.
We were listening to each other. Now we're not.
You want to say anything?
You're not listening to us. I am listening. No, you're not. How can I not be listening to
You
you?
do not control this conversation.
I'm not trying to control.
Yes, you are. Yes, he is. Stop. You're acting like white supremacy.
If you, my dear viewer, harbor even the smallest doubt that our university campuses have become the indoctrination capitals of the religious cult of SJW, then what you just saw in the clip should help dispel any such notion. This is ugly. This is the type of thing that marginalized groups cry about all the time. The mindless mob rule of our past brought directly into the present by the biggest of the professional crybabies. Evergreen's president asked campus police to stand down and thus creating an unsafe climate, forcing Weinstein to hold his class off campus, while pro-racist students were taking pictures of the professor and his students and sending them around the campus. George Bridges, the president of Evergreen, having done much to make the campus so unsafe that Weinstein had to check with police every day to be advised if it was safe for him to enter the campus, actually encouraged the menacing mob of anti-free speech students by calling them courageous and expressed his gratitude for this catalyst to expedite the work to which we are jointly committed. Of course, there was also pablum about how free speech must be fostered and encouraged. But if that's what Mr. Bridges really believes, why isn't he doing everything in his power to protect a professor who exercised it and condemn the mob that tried to stifle him? Here's a clip from Tucker Carlson that is enlightening about this chain of events.
Wow. Professor Bret Weinstein joins us now. Professor, first of all, thank you for coming on. That looks like something, out of Phnom Penh, 1975. Was that, what exactly was going on there? What happened?
Well, what happened is that 50 or so students decided to disrupt the class that I was holding that morning and demand my resignation.
Because you wouldn't leave campus because you're white?
Well, they imagine that I am a racist and that I am teaching racism in the classroom, and that has caused them to imagine that I have no right to speak, that I am harming students by the very act of teaching them.
What happened after the video cut out?
Well, that's an interesting story. The campus police apparently showed up outside of the classroom. The protesters then blocked their entrance. I did not call the police. Someone else called the police, and they were concerned for my safety. But when they tried to come into the building to make sure that I was okay, the protesters blocked them. And because the issue of policing is so sensitive at the moment, the police had to run around and find another entrance to the building to get inside and check with me. At the point they did that, the protesters moved on and corralled the president of the college at his office. They extracted some demands from him. Among the demands was that there would be a meeting, well, actually, demands is perhaps the wrong word, a concession, that there would be a meeting at 4 o'clock in a large room on top of our library building. That meeting took place at the end of the day, and believe it or not, it was far crazier than the video that you just showed.
This whole story is so over the top that even though we do a lot of these, it's hard for me to believe it's real. So the core demand is that all people of your skin color leave the campus. Your president is a guy called George Bridges. Where was he?
Bridges.
Why isn't, there he is right there. George Bridges is supposed to be running this school. Why is he allowing a mob to threaten one of his professors?
Well, I must say, I have some concern that the story is so strange that it's not even going to make sense to an audience that isn't local to the campus. Dr. Bridges is allowing this mob to effectively control the campus, and they have been in control since 9:30 on Tuesday morning. At this moment, I believe Dr. Bridges is answering a set of demands put forward by the protesters, and they have said that if he does not accept their demands, that there will be violence. I do not know what his response to those demands is going to be, but I know that that's taking place at this hour.
Excuse me?
Get the camera on her.
Can we?
No, fuck you, George. We don't want to hear a goddamn thing you have to say. You
Then
talk
I
so
should-
fucking
then you're
much. No,
asking
you
me-
shut the
you're
fuck
asking me-
up.
No,
I think what's smart is not to I think what's smart is not to tone police people, because people are angry, and so what matters is what they're saying, not how they're saying it.
I want to hear about the faculty member.
Bret Weinstein, you're racist. Can we hear about Bret when Stacey gets here? Because Stacey's involved with Bret.
Yeah.
I think that's a way to hold everybody more accountable and to make the students happy in a way that
Can you tell
can
me
result in
what
resolution.
she's involved with Brett?
Yeah, we can tell
Can we
you
go
when Stacey
sit in
gets
that
here.
big ass office, please?
It's being used right now for an interview.
Oh, this is much more important than that.
Oh yeah,
For the new vice president.
we pay here.
Oh, this is definitely much more important than that. This is definitely much more than
And
that.
that's where we're moving right now.
Can someone
Okay. Well, we could go to like.
Do you know any other room we could go into, George?
I do not know of another.
You're the
room.
president of the school and you don't know any other room we can go to.
They know
I said you're the president of the school and you don't know any other room we can go to?
You know exactly where we could go.
Is there any
That
way
was
to
I know
I
lots
don't
of
like
rooms.
volunteer.
I know lots of rooms. They may
finding
be
cups
filled
of
with
water?
He has also told the police to stand down. So although the campus police have a sense of what it is that needs to happen in a circumstance like this, they have been hobbled by the fact that they answer to the college administration, and in fact for several days have been barricaded in the campus police station.
Oh my gosh, this is like something out of another country. It's just hard to believe any of this is real. And just, our viewers should look this up online, because there's a lot of pieces to the story. It's hard to convey on television, but you had this, I thought, powerful line in your letter, and I assume you're no kind of right-winger. If you teach at Evergreen, I'm sure you're, you know, a Hillary voter, but you had this
No,
line.
not a Hillary voter. I'm a deeply progressive person, and I must say
there you go.
I'm troubled by what this implies about the current state of the left.
Well, you think? You said people shouldn't be allowed to speak or not on the basis of their skin color, which seems like a foundational belief of the left, and one that I agree with strongly. And for that, they physically threatened you and are trying to get you fired. This is unbelievable.
Yes, they are absolutely trying to get me fired, and they believe that my words in my email are transparently racist, and I think we're caught quite off guard when people who were not at Evergreen read my letter and couldn't find any racism in it.
Well, yeah, just the opposite.
Weinstein mentions this letter, and here are the 2 paragraphs in his letter to Rashidullah that are considered so racist. I'm not going to read them here, but Weinstein basically protests the obvious that voluntary absence, as opposed to compelling people to be excluded based on race, is wrong, and that he is protesting the day and will be present. But there is more. These entitled students are suffering from traumatic anxiety disorder.
And then they get
charged or with student conduct violations and have to leave the school, and that's what happens to people of color and disabled folks who are trying to speak up and say something, and they have to leave the school or have to feel unsafe here or have to feel like the whole administration is doing something against them. That is not okay. That is silencing. And that is what I'm afraid is going to happen with people who are, you know, you're saying that, like, I mean, I understand that it's like maybe feels threatening when people are trying to say all this stuff at you, but it feels threatening every day for students who are trying to exist here and don't feel safe and don't feel like they ever have a chance to say any of this.
Yes, thank you.
Have an announcement.
Let's not mention that Wendy and this committee wrote this email in what took one day, and there still hasn't been an apology.
And there were a lot of lies in that email about how the situation was over at midnight. It was over at 2:30 in the morning. It wasn't over at midnight. They were pulled out 15 minutes before midnight.
And I don't understand why the people listed in there aren't, like, at this point suing, because y'all did label them with, like, anxiety disorder that you didn't even know if that was even, like, something that they lived with.
Oh, don't worry. The law.
Who are you to label black and brown people with this type of, like, illness that you don't even know if they have it? Who are you?
Not a doctor.
Notice in this next exchange they refer to Stacy Brown, who is the chief of campus police, as a cockroach.
Shayla has an announcement.
Okay, we called Stacy Brown, right? That's the roach's name? Okay. She refuses to come, hung up on us, so let's do what we need to with that information. Yeah, keep calling. They keep hanging up on us, so...
So what if we had a real emergency and they just won't help us? Like,
right.
What about...
Do we have to be white for you to help?
How are we supposed to be safe here on campus if we can't even get help from, like, people who are supposed to protect us?
That
but
sounds
no,
like another
they
option.
fear from us. They fear of us trying to mace us in the eyes and shit. For what? For us saying, like, hey, Bret, you need to apologize? For one fucking white guy?
Is there any black folks in need water?
For one fucking white guy? Could it be that the spineless president of the college has tied the campus police hands so much so that they are unable to guarantee safety for faculty, let alone the students? Maybe this racist mob that refers to white people as roaches and calls an esteemed professor one fucking white guy are creating an atmosphere that is dangerous. It is no wonder that the modern SJW goon squad bends over backwards to coddle dangerous Islamists who they have so much in common with, their modern-day witch hunts, and Professor Weinstein is the latest in a long list of blasphemers. Like the parts of the world where Sharia law dominate, these SJWs who are the modern-day Inquisition, you are guilty and will never be proven right. To give them an inch is death. Similar to terrorists, you are not able to negotiate with them. Like the Islamists commanding right and forbidding wrong, they make the laws and you are forced to obey or else. These wrongfully oppressed upper-middle-class college students are creating the world that they constantly cry about. Because, you know, decades ago and up to hundreds of years ago, people that are alive now and should have no retroactive guilt for the sins of their forefathers, are supposed to pay with their own freedom and rights as human beings to right the wrongs of the past, the wrongs that people have already fought for and paid with the ultimate fee, their lives. This is not enough for these entitled brats who have become so emboldened and extreme they are eating their own. It comes as no surprise that most of the civilized world, the Americas and Europe as well as much of the rest of the globe, have come to regard basic human rights as just that, rights. It is no longer acceptable to enslave a group of people or not allow half of their population to vote. This is pretty big, since throughout most of human history basic human rights and equality were rarely guaranteed for the majority of the population. There are uncivilized holdouts mainly in Muslim-majority countries, but the rest of us are pretty okay with all people having the same rights as all others. The New York Times piece ends with, "Shutting down conservatives has become de rigueur. But now anti-free speech activists are increasingly turning their ire on free-thinking progressives. Liberals shouldn't cede the responsibility to defend free speech on college campuses to conservatives. After all, without free speech, what's liberalism about?" I have for years railed against what I perceived as the conservatives marching in lockstep, not being able to deviate from the pack. They have to stay in line, and I do still feel this way about many far-right people afraid to have their own opinions for fear of being ostracized or shunned. However, This new breed of authoritarian left makes the mean old righties pale by comparison. The social justice warrior dystopian society that forbids freedom of conscience. That enforces one twisted victimhood ideology where some people are branded as evil oppressors based not on their actions but their skin color or the accident of birth to which they are born guilty and must make reparations with their most cherished possession, their freedom. They strive to create a brave new world where the long list of self-created genders or alternate realities can make one person worth more than others. According to Heterodox Academy, Mr. Weinstein is just the latest victim in the long list of blasphemers in this modern-day witch hunt following the likes of Professor Jordan Peterson, feminist Rebecca Tuval, Heather MacDonald as well as many others. I'm certain that this man-made disaster at Evergreen State College is far from over. We are on the side of freedom of speech and conscience. I consider myself about as liberal as Mr. Weinstein, but the regressive left has made liberalism seem dirty and tainted. This is not the case because the majority of free-thinking people are not of the same state of mind as those on the alt-left, and therein lies our hope. Thank you for taking your valuable time to view and support this channel. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing and check the links in the description on how to support Disturbing Trends, the channel. Goodbye.
I would like to inform you that the police, the on-campus police, came. The on-campus police came onto a crowd that was, and they were ill-informed. We had Bret Weinstein out in D, in the hallway of the second floor of D, and on one side of the room, all these protesters were on one side of the room, except for maybe people recording. On the other side of Bret Weinstein, there were people, there were his students, there were about...
An open door.
Yep, an open door, all open doors, and he was not struggling, he was not like, he tried to leave at first, and he was protected, and he was protected by his students. Excuse me, can I please finish? This is very important. Sure. And the on-campus police officers came at us while we were outside of that space. We had left Weinstein behind, and they came at us, hurtling at us, saying, "Get out of my way," as they shoved white students away. The black students and people of color were behind us.
About 50 feet behind.
About 50 feet behind us. And I asked them, "Do you think that Bret Weinstein is here?" And he said, "Yes, we do. We were told that he is here." And I was like, "You are ill-informed. You need to leave." And I was walking around E building and D building, and I heard faculty already saying that they heard from police that Bret Weinstein was surrounded and threatened, and that is simply not true.